Hello students, how are you? I hope you're still keeping safe, you're still fine and healthy. This is Teacher Hilda, your teacher for literature, that is Senior 6, and I want you to be ready with your pens and notebooks so that we can study. But before we start, I want to remind you that this program is brought to you by the Rwanda Education Board in partnership with MASTERCARD Foundation and Inspire, Educate and Empower Rwanda. So in our lessons, we have been looking at Animal Farm. Animal Farm by George Orwell. We have looked at the biography of the author, where he was born and his other works. We have looked at the plot summary, how the story flows in the text. We have summarized chapter by chapter from chapter 1 to chapter 10. And we have also looked at the themes in the text Animal Farm. So today we are going to look at character and character traits, or character and characterization. Okay, we have a number of characters in the text Animal Farm. We can categorize them as animals and humans. There are those characters that are animals and there are those characters that are humans. The animals are Major, Snowball, Napoleon, Squealer, Boxer, Molly, Clover, Benjamin, Moses, the dogs, the hens, and we also have the humans. For example, Mr. Jones and Mrs. Jones, Mr. Wimpa, Mr. Pilkington, Mr. Frederick. Okay, so we are going to start by characterizing Napoleon. Napoleon is the primary antagonist of the novel. So Napoleon is one of the major characters in the novel, who is one of Old Major's disciples along with Snowball. So at first, Napoleon and Snowball worked together to develop the ideology of animalism and spread its ideals throughout all the animals on the farm. But Napoleon proves to have very different goals than Snowball. When Snowball is relatively idealistic and wants to help others, Napoleon soon proves himself cruel and he is power hungry. So when the conflict comes to a head over whether or not to build a windmill, Napoleon reveals that he has trained 9 dogs to be his secret police force and chases Snowball off the farm. Okay, and this institutes a totalitarian state at Animal Farm. So Napoleon maintains his rule by demanding unwavering loyalty and trust from his subjects, and he achieves at least outward displays of trust through intimidation and spread of misinformation through propaganda. Napoleon is often the one to make great pronouncements, but then always sends the pig Squealer around to convince everyone that Napoleon is actually acting in their best interests and never in his own interests. So he is interested in educating the young pigs, the piglets. So throughout the novel, Napoleon proves himself to be paranoid, self-important, and unable to accept his wrong. So he blames all manners of horrible things on either Snowball or on the neighboring farmers. So by the end of the novel, Napoleon is undistinguishable from humans and has denounced along. He is actually fat. He is now fat, powerful, and begins to walk on 2 legs, wear clothes, and carry a whip. So in Napoleon's eyes, it is a good thing that the other animals are so hungry and powerless, and he insists that the state of affairs is called for in animalism. So he ultimately changes Animal Farm's name back to Manor Farm in a bid to make it seem more palatable to the farmers, and he proves himself to be just as corrupt as his human counterparts.
Come along and play with us.
So let us look at Snowball. The other character is Snowball. So at first, Snowball is a friend to Napoleon. Okay, Snowball and Napoleon developed the theory of animalism from the ideas of Old Major's speech, and they later distilled these ideas down into 7 commandments. Snowball is responsible for generating the maxim 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, which he teaches to the sheep and other less intelligent animals in order to give them some version of the 7 commandments, okay? Some version of the 7 commandments to repeat. So, despite being the generator of this maxim, in the month after, the phrase often gets used against Snowball during Sunday meetings, as the sheep often start bleating the maxim out of the blue during Snowball's speeches. So, it's implied that these interruptions are Napoleon's work, as the two pigs develop an intense rivalry in the months after the rebellion. So, Snowball is somewhat of an idealistic individual. He proposes that the farm animals build a windmill in order to generate electricity, which he suggests will ultimately lead to a 3-day work week. So he also comes up with a variety of other schemes and groups aimed at improving the animals' lives and education status. And he also promotes spreading news of the rebellion far and wide. So despite idealism, Snowball still shows himself to be willing to exploit the other animals for his own gain, as when he says nothing about taking the milk and apples for the pigs only. So on the day that the animals vote to build a windmill, Napoleon exiles Snowball by setting his attack dogs on him. After this, Snowball disappears as a character, but Napoleon continues to invoke Snowball as a figure who conspires against Animal Farm in a league with humans and is intent on messing everything up on the farm. So through this, Napoleon discredits Snowball's bravery and action in the Battle of Cowshed, and makes it so no animal will feel sorry for Snowball, but they should only respect Napoleon. The other character in the text is Boxer. So Boxer is a huge, gentle cart horse. So Boxer isn't especially intelligent. He only learns the first 4 letters of the alphabet. But Old Major's speech and the equality expressed in the 7 commandments appeals to his generous nature. So because of this, Boxer becomes one of Napoleon's and Snowball's biggest disciples as they attempt to spread the ideals of animalism to others. As Boxer is capable of making simple, easy to understand arguments to his peers. So after the rebellion, Boxer then becomes one of the most valuable members of Animal Farm, as he has fully sold on its ideals, entirely loyal to Napoleon and convinced that his hard work is absolutely essential to the success of the farm. So on that final point, Boxer is right. His labor is what makes it so that the animals are able to build both attempts at their windmill. He has 2 mottos. The first one is, "I work hard," and Napoleon is always right. So through these mottos, the novel shows how someone like Boxer sacrifices himself to the cause at the expense of everything, including his health, his intellect, and his possibility for advancement. Boxer never realizes that Napoleon is the reasons conditions are so poor on Animal Farm, and he never becomes aware of his own strength and power to change anything. This means that when Boxer collapses, he fully believes that Napoleon is going to send him to a vet to be treated, and he can't read the writing on the van that comes to take him away, whereby the van is from the glue factory. So by the time other animals alert Boxer to what's going on, Boxer is far too weak to make any successful attempt to save himself, and instead his death goes on to benefit the ruling class of pigs on Animal Farm. And what do you think is the ruling class? The Napoleon type.
Come along and play with us.
Let us also look at another character who is Benjamin. Okay, Benjamin is a donkey with a skeptical view that life will always be difficult and painful. Because of this outlook, Benjamin isn't surprised when the pigs corrupt the revolution and transform Animal Farm into a totalitarian state. Though his skepticism proves to be well-founded, and alone among the animals seems aware of what's going on. He alone among the animals know what's going on. It also renders him ineffective, as he's unwilling to speak up or do anything to stop it. So he also consistently refuses to explain what's going on to his friends, as when he refuses to read the 7 commandments to Clover and alone understands what he's seeing when the animals find Squealer and paint next to a broken ladder. So this comes back to haunt him when Napoleon betrays Boxer and sends him to the glue factory. So though Benjamin does not speak up and tell animals what's going on. Let us look at Squealer. The other character is Squealer. So Squealer is a fat pig who is a skilled orator. Okay, so Squealer works closely with Snowball and Napoleon at first, and later just Napoleon to interpret or distill what the pig's plan is for the other animals. Squealer is able to convince other animals of anything, and he's very effective in his job. Sometimes he's effective because of the way he's able to manipulate language. Other times, Squealer is effective because the attack dogs accompany him. He benefits from Napoleon's rule, as Squealer is often tasked with addressing the animals during Sunday meetings and gets the same extensive rations as the rest of the pigs. So at the end of the novel, Squealer he learns to walk on 2 legs and teaches the sheep that the maxim 4 legs good, 2 legs better. So he's present at the meeting between the pigs and the farmers. The other character is Old Major. Old Major is an old boer who, at the beginning of the novel, gathers the information together to speak to them about what's wrong with their world. So he proposes that humanity is what's wrong with their world. The problem with humanity, not the animals. So Old Major's speech forms the basis of animalism, a theory that Napoleon and Snowball develop in the 3 months after Old Major's death. So Old Major dies a few months before the revolution and never gets to see his ideas play out in the real world. But Napoleon does eventually move on with Old Major's ideas. So the other character is Clover. He's a gentle, motherly, and powerful cat horse. She supports the revolution, of course, and she naturally takes it upon herself to protect those who are weaker than her. So she recognizes this kind of communal spirit echoed in the 7 commandments. When animal farm begins to descend into a totalitarian state under Napoleon, Clover becomes dismayed, but she does not have the will, the personality, or the education to resist the pigs. So Clover never becomes fully literate and only learns the alphabet, and she's unable to detect changes on the 7 commandments and buys into everything the pigs say. So in this sense, she becomes a witness to the corruption, though she only understands that something went wrong, but still believes that the totalitarian state she finds herself living in must be better than life under Mr. Jones.
Come along and play with us.
So let us look at Mr. Jones, the other character. Mr. Jones is the original owner of Manor Farm, once a strict and fierce master. So in the years before the story began, Mr. Jones became drunk, careless, and ineffective, as well as casually cruel and arrogant. Mr. Jones' carelessness and cruelty are the final straw for the animals. They instigate a rebellion when he neglects to feed them, and he tries to beat them when they break into the stores of grain. Though Mr. Jones attempts to take back Animal Farm, his attempt is unsuccessful, and none of the other farmers have much genuine sympathy for him. The other character is Mr. Pilkington. So Mr. Pilkington is a gentleman farmer who owns Foxwood, one of Animal Farm's neighbors. So Foxwood is large, okay, but old-fashioned, and Mr. Pilkington himself spends more time hunting and on leisure activities than he does farming. So Mr. Pilkington attends the final card game at Animal House and tries to cheat Napoleon. The other character is Mr. Frederick. Mr. Frederick is the owner of the neighboring farm of Peachfield. He's vicious, cruel, and calculating, and rumors circulate that he's especially horrible to his farm animals. After suffering abuse from Napoleon, Mr. Frederick ultimately purchases timber from Animal Farm, but he pays it with fake notes, and days later attacks Animal Farm and blows up the windmill. So though he is successful in the endeavor, he disappears from the story after this point. Okay? So let us look at the cat. The cat is greedy and self-serving. She's only interested in participating in the rebellion when there is no cost of danger. And she's only willing to support animalism when it might help her, though it is implied that she doesn't truly believe in their ideology even then. So she parrots its ideals to try to dupe birds she would like to eat. So the cat disappears before Napoleon turns Animal Farm into an entirely totalitarian state.
Come along and play with us.
The other character is Molly. Molly is a vain white horse who, prior to the rebellion, pulls Mr. Jones' cart. She loves sugar and wearing pretty ribbons and never cares much for the revolution. So supporting it would mean she wouldn't have sugar and ribbons. So because of this, she abandons Animal Farm and enters into her service for other humans only a few months after the rebellion. The other character is the sheep, some of the least intelligent animals on Animal Farm. They never become fully literate and can't remember the 7 commandments, but Snowball teaches them the maxim 4 legs good, 2 legs bad, which they love and bleat all the time. So they are receptive to propaganda and follow orders without questioning anything. The hens, they are the unintelligent animals on Animal Farm. They are initially fully behind the rebellion and the ideals of Animal Farm, but become somewhat disillusioned. They lose hope and they are terrified when Napoleon insists that they must surrender their eggs. Okay, so the hens' rebellion is unsuccessful because 9 of them die and they surrender. The dogs, we have Jessie, Bluebell, and Peacher, and the 9 attack dogs provide the pigs with the brat force necessary to terrorize the other animals. So in return, the dogs receive special privileges and often sit close to the pigs. They don't rule, but they live comfortably and get enough to eat because they support the pigs. The other character is Morel, a white goat. So one of the few animals who becomes fully literate. Where Morel doesn't correspond to any one person, she can be seen as a representation of educated individuals who are able to interpret what's going on, but who don't have the charisma or the power to speak their minds. The other character is Moses, Mr. Jones' special pet. So the animals dislike him because he doesn't work. But many of them do believe his stories about Sugar Candy Mountain, a wonderful place where animals go when they die. So Moses represents an organized religion and specifically the Russian Orthodox Church. So let us look at the second last character, who is Mr. Wimpa. So Mr. Wimpa is a solicitor whom Napoleon hires to represent Animal Farm on the outside world. So he is shrewd and calculating, and by the end of the novel, he has done well for himself. So the last character is Minimus. Minimus is a pig who writes propaganda poems and songs for Napoleon. These songs and poems praise him and Animal Farm. So we also have some characters like Mrs. Jones. Mrs. Jones flees from the farm when the animals rebel.
Come along and play with us.
Yeah, so that is all about the character and the different characters in the text and the character traits. We have looked at a number of them and we have tried to give them their character traits. So that is it about character traits in Animal Farm. And in our next lesson, we are going to conclude the text Animal Farm. We shall look at the writing techniques. What techniques does the writer employ, and the symbols in Animal Farm? What symbols does the writer use, and what do they symbolize? So I want to thank you for paying attention. Thanks for being good students. I want you to stay home, keep safe until we meet during our next lesson. Bye-bye.
Goodbye, 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 teacher. Goodbye, children. See you next time. Goodbye, 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 teacher. Goodbye, children. See you next time.